Hey guys, welcome back to our podcast. This is
Hi.
Two Girls, One Cut plus Tracy.
Hey,
To find us, you'll go to the Nighthawk Radio Facebook page. Um, Tracy said, yes, Seth said cut.
yes,
C-U-T, cut.
CUT.
But Tracy said that he had somebody trying to find us on Facebook today, and they were having a hard time, with it popping up. So just make sure that that's all one word, and that should pop up there for you. Or you can find us on Seth's Daily Podcast on YouTube and Spotify, or Seth the Soil Guy on TikTok. Today we're going to talk about Robert Hansen, also known as the Butcher Baker of Alaska. So Robert was born in 1939 in Estherville, Iowa. His parents were his dad was Christian. He was a Danish immigrant, and his mother was Edna Hansen. His father was very strict, and he forced him to work in a bakery. Very long hours. I saw an interview where one of his teachers in high school said that he was an average student, but a below average grades. And I think a lot of that comes from just the fact that he had to get up at 2 a.m. before school, get the bakery ready for it to be opened before he would actually be able to go to school. And this was when he was only 10 years old. He started working in his father's bakery. And I know that his dad would pay him, but very, very little. It would be like 35 cents per day. And then I think eventually he made like $1 a day.
I think we need
Which
to reinstate that. I think we need to reinstate that with children today.
you
Yeah,
think
Sorry.
so? Start working at 10 years
Sorry.
old?
Yeah. Go
All
ahead.
right.
at 35 cents a day.
Right.
35 cents a day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you can work your way all the way up to one whole dollar.
One whole
One
dollar.
dollar a
One whole
day.
dollar.
Mm-hmm.
But I also read that he was actually born, he was left-handed. He was left-hand dominant, but his parents tried to get him to use his right hand instead because they didn't want him to be, I guess, an outcast or different than the
His
majority.
dad was a lefty. His dad was a lefty.
Really? I didn't know
His dad
that.
was a lefty.
Okay,
Yep.
interesting. But I also listened to an interview with, I think it was like a child psychologist, and they said that actually whenever you do that, you try to get these children to use, the right hand versus the left hand, just to make it, I guess, more convenient in life. Because a lot of things are, um,
Right
you're
hand dominant.
batting
Made
a
for
lot of
right. Yep.
or
Made for
shooting or
right hand.
whatever. Yeah. It can also cause stuttering when you try to do that. And so Robert, he had a really bad stutter, and he was bullied a lot because of that. And I think they're kind of like speculating that maybe it was because his parents were trying to force him to be right-handed whenever he was actually, born left-hand dominant. Um, but he also had a lot of acne from a young age. And I know as he got older, he had like a lot of acne scars because of that. So he got bullied a lot as a kid. He was kind of a loner in school. He didn't participate in a whole lot of extracurriculars. I think I read somewhere that he was maybe in like a Boy Scouts type of thing. Um, but as far as any other extracurriculars, he didn't really do a whole lot. He was just, kind of a loner. He spent most of his free time in the bakery helping his dad. Um, but eventually he graduated high school in 1957 and he joined the U.S. Army Reserves. Um, he was a skilled marksman, and he only worked one weekend per month for the U.S. Army. And then the rest of the time, he worked in the bakery. He continued to work in the bakery. But he also volunteered as an assistant drill sergeant at a police academy in his town. And I know in between this time, his family moved around. I think whenever he was a little bit younger, his family moved around a little bit to California. Abby said she saw Minnesota. But I think finally his family just kind of ended up back in Iowa. And then in 1960, he married a local woman where he lived in Iowa. I think they called it, was it Pocahontas?
Mhm.
Pocahontas.
At that point was Pocahontas, Iowa. But that same year in 1960, he decided that he was going to burn down the school bus garage. I guess kind of in retaliation for all of the bullying that he had throughout school, because it was his local school's bus
Right.
garage that he had, graduated from. But he served 20 months for that crime, and his wife divorced him and said that he had an infantile personality. And then 1963, he married another woman, and he had 2 children with her. And then in 1967, after he had many jail sentences for petty theft, him and his wife and their 2 children decided that they were going to move to Anchorage, Alaska. And he was pretty well liked in the area. And in this time, he became an avid hunter in Alaska. He broke several hunting records using his rifles and bow and arrows, which I had actually read that after he was convicted of murders, they actually, I guess, took that back. They said, "I guess you're not worthy to hold these trophies anymore."
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, I didn't know that you
Well,
could just
take it
take
back.
those away.
Well, I didn't know that, but did you know that he was also an insurance fraudulent claimer, where he
Yes.
claimed that some of those trophies were stolen when
Yes.
they were not, and he used that money to buy the little puddle jumper plane that he used in some of
Yeah.
his crimes,
As well as the
and
bakery
as well as
that
the
he ended
bakery.
up opening.
When
Yeah.
he was
Yeah.
in Iowa, wasn't he accused of rape?
It
Not
was
not in
well,
Iowa, I don't believe.
no, he
Okay.
did have a charge. He did have a charge though in the lower 48, and it was trying to think what it was, because he was one of those ones where I thought,
How
how
did he
did
get
they
that far?
slip through? Yeah, how did
Yeah.
he slip through and have all of these different crimes and all of these different traits
Yeah.
and get all of this time and do very minimal, and then none at all, and then gets to restart in a essentially brand new land, brand
And
new world.
on top of that, he was a pillar of the community.
Oh,
You
they
know,
loved him.
but
He would.
I thought I seen somewhere where I don't know if he had a run-in with a prostitute while he was in Iowa, or if he
It
had
was
an attempted rape
something.
charge or something like that.
It was something, and I want to say that the individual that it was against, that got away from him or what have you, either dropped the charges or they were found to be not credible, and it
Yes,
was
because they
just,
were a prostitute. Yeah, you're right.
and it
Yeah,
was just like swept under the rug, because I
right.
thought, how many times does that happen with these fellas? I mean, if you look at it, here he was bullied as a young man. He joined some part of the branch of the service. He, had all of these things. And so many of these serial killers have almost the exact same story
Right.
in the very beginning. His just took a very strange turn in the way that he liked to do his jam, I feel like.
And you might be onto something, because how many serial killers have had really super close run-ins with the police and
Oh,
nothing ever happens about it?
because they're so cool. They're so calm. They're so ready.
Yes.
It's
You
like the
know,
adrenaline for them. That's what
Yeah.
keeps them going. They
Yeah.
want that adrenaline rush.
hmm
how close to the sun can you get without getting burnt? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So
But he was definitely one.
him and his family moved to Alaska in 1967, and I read that in 1973. So, 5, 6 years after, that's when he was convicted of raping the prostitute and attempting to rape a housewife. I don't guess she was, a sex worker or anything. I don't know if it was just a random woman that he picked up. I'm not really sure. They're unidentified from my sources. So I would assume that maybe they don't want their names out there.
Right.
They don't want to be associated with it. But he only served 6 months for both of those charges, which kind of blows my mind. And then he kind of flew under the radar for a couple years. 1977, he stole a chainsaw from, I think it was like a local hardware store.
Yeah, he just tried to walk out with it.
Yeah. And he only served 1 year for that. But during that time that he served, he was actually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I think I saw something that said that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia as well. So they put him on some medications for that. And then I read that in the early 1980s is when he reported burglary of his home. So that's when he says, "Oh, all of my trophies, all of my
Personal effects in the way of
yes,
his
all of these
got stolen.
hunting trophies, all of these deer heads, or what do they have up there in Alaska? Moose.
There's moose,
Elk.
there's goats, there's
All the
Bears.
things were stolen.
bears.
So with that money, that's what he used to open up his bakery as well as purchase his airplane.
Mhm.
But he couldn't even get a license to drive, I guess, to fly the airplane because of the medications that he was prescribed, the medications that he had to take because of, his mental diagnosis.
Lord, that's a whole other story in itself. How you teach yourself to fly a plane.
Right? Literally.
You don't screw that up, do you?
Right.
Well,
No,
and
you got
you
the one and
didn't
done.
have YouTube in the 1980s.
You're right. Oh my God!
There was no YouTube.
I never thought of that. I mean, who teaches themselves how to fly a plane?
Right.
Look at that thing and go, you know what? I think I could fly that.
I think I can do
without dying.
this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow,
Very
Yeah.
interesting.
that dude's ballsy.
Right?
It sure is.
I'll go make you a
apparently
donut
he
and then
could
fly a
make
plane I've never flown before.
Yeah, and apparently he really could put the donuts out because he supplied the Anchorage Police Department with free donuts
Oh, how
virtually
nice
the
of
entire
him.
time. Yep, the entire
How
time
nice
that
of
he
him.
owned
Well,
his bakery so that he could be that stand-up citizen.
Wow.
Isn't
See,
that
I didn't know that. That's
You know,
crazy.
Mhm.
keep your friends
Yeah.
close, but keep your enemies closer type thing?
Right.
Interesting.
Keep them fed, fat and
Yeah.
sassy.
Well, it's no wonder then why the police department let him fly under the radar for so long.
Right. He was feeding them.
Yeah.
Well, one, I mean, they would probably consider him a buddy,
Yeah.
Sure.
and like how serial killers can, go in and out of these personalities.
Mhm.
He could probably put on a pretty good show in front of them. So when these accusations would come up, they were probably like, no way, there's no way that could happen.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But it happened
that did happen. Yeah.
multiple times.
That's crazy. And also, what kind of woman would stay with a man that was convicted of raping women?
Or even
it just kind of,
accused.
what is it?
Or even just accused of it. Not even
Right.
convicted.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you got
Let
to get
alone convicted.
the mentality of stand by your man type thing. We're talking, 60s and 70s.
Right. Yeah.
Today, we can look at that and go, no way. Why would nobody would stay with somebody like that?
Yeah,
But
you're
back
right.
then, times were a little different.
Well, my guess is here you are in a totally different area of the world. You don't have any family, you don't have any support system, you
Yeah.
have
Yeah,
children, and he's probably the breadwinner, and you're probably just the lowly housewife that,
yeah,
he comes home to after he bakes his pastries and kills women.
right.
Yeah. And then you got to think about how much did she know? You know,
Right.
again, that serial killer personality in and out. He may have fed her so much stuff that she believed every word he said.
Right.
Hmm.
But it's believed that he began his killings in 1971. There was a woman named Celia Van Zanten. She was kidnapped in, I think, December 22nd, and her body was found December 25th, so a couple days
Yeah.
later. And I guess the police or whoever had found her, their guess was that she had died trying to escape from her abductor. She actually froze to death.
Oh,
And
that'd be terrible.
I know, and all signs kind of point to Hansen, but I guess he never actually admitted to that killing. Um, but they're suspecting that it was him. And
Was
then
it on the map? Was it
it
on the
was on
map?
the map. It was on the map,
Oh,
but it was one that he did not admit to. So,
okay.
but we'll get to the map.
Okay.
Um, so Cindy Paulson, she is kind of who I guess really put him on police's radar.
Mm.
Um, Kinda, I guess, but I'll get into it. So, June 13th of 1983, he offered a woman named Cindy Paulson. She was only 17 years old at this time. He offered her $200 for sexual acts. When she got into the car, he ended up pulling a gun on her, and he took her back to his house. And he raped and tortured her downstairs in his basement. And he ended up chaining her to a post down in the basement. And he chained her by her neck. He also had her handcuffed. And he went over on the other side of the basement and took a nap on the couch while she was handcuffed. So if that doesn't tell you that, this doesn't bother him in the absolute slightest,
No.
he can just go take a nap right after assaulting a woman like that.
And chaining her like a dog.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But so while he was asleep, she was kind of like taking in everything around her. And I listened to a couple of interviews with her. She said that there were children's toys around her. She was thinking, okay, this guy's got kids. She noticed all of the different animal heads hanging up on the wall, the taxidermy. Um, so she kind of just took in all of her surroundings. She remembered a blanket. I think she said it was like a camouflage blanket, but she wanted to make sure that when or if she was able to escape, that she would be able to track this man down, or at least make this man pay for, what he had done.
Mm-hmm.
So when he woke up, he took her to his vehicle and he put her in the back. And he took her to his plane and said that I'm just going to take you to my hunting shack in the woods, but the only way to get there is by plane or boat, and I don't have a boat, so we're going by plane. So while he is loading everything up in the cockpit, she was able to sneak out of the back seat. And I also listened in the interview. She said that she took off. She had a pair of blue sneakers. She took them off in the back seat and left them there for evidence because she wanted to make sure, that the police would find her shoes in his car.
This girl was pretty savvy.
She was, yeah, very, very smart. And like I said, she was only 17 years old, but she worked as a prostitute, and I don't think that anybody else knew that she was only 17 years old. And I could go all into her story, but I don't know if we have time for that. But she had a pretty rough childhood. She left home at 12 years old. And she moved to Alaska, when she was 17, but she kind of lived on her own between 12 to 17. So yeah, she found a boyfriend, I guess you could say, but he was really her pimp, and he would, pimp these women out, and she was one of them. And in these instances, they would always, the pimp would say, don't go to the police for anything because, prostituting is illegal. So all of the prostitutes would, they'd be afraid to go to the police and share, what may have happened to them, because they were afraid that they would get in trouble too, as well as, the man who was pimping them out, But anyway, so she got away from him, and she took off running through the field. And she got to the highway. He's chasing after her. She flags down a car or a truck. A man opens up the door for her. He's like, what's going on? What can I do for you? And she's like, just go, just go. And the man sees Hanson running after her. So he knows that, like, this isn't a good situation.
The shotgun.
Yes.
Yes,
Sees
with a shotgun.
Yes, sees him running behind her with a shotgun. She says, I don't want to go to the police. Just take me back to my hotel that I'm staying in. And so he does. He feels sorry for her, and he wants her to be, as comfortable as she can be. So he takes her back to the hotel, and he continues his drive on to work. But whenever he gets to work, he calls the police and reports, kind of what had happened. So the police go to the hotel room to find her. They figure out what room she's in. They knock on the door. She answers it. And she's still got her handcuffs on her hands. And, she's visibly distraught. And the police officer, he, uncuffs her. He has a key, so he uncuffs her, and he takes her to the hospital to have a rape kit done. And it shows that obviously, she was sexually assaulted. And they go to question Hanson. And Hanson pretty much says that, yeah, she was a prostitute. She was trying to, get some more money from me than what we had agreed on. So, and I didn't pay her any extra. So now she's retaliating, and she's just trying to get me in trouble now. So he was saying that she was turning it around on him, which was obviously not the case. But
Right.
he also said that it didn't happen that night. He was like, yeah, we had some, sexual intercourse, but it didn't happen last night. This was a couple nights ago. I was with a friend last night. So they contact the friend. The friend says, oh, yeah, he was with me. He was with me. So they end up going back to the hotel to find her because they want her to do a polygraph test to see if she's the one that's lying, which just kind of blows my mind because, like, who's going to make this kind of stuff up? A prostitute at that, like, yeah, I could see where I don't know. Honestly, I can't see it at all.
He took them donuts frequently.
Yeah.
That's it.
He
That's exactly.
He wouldn't do that.
But to me, and I don't mean to jump, forward too far, but interestingly, this is the lady that gets him in the end.
That's the lady. Yeah, this is the lady.
And it's years later.
Yes. And there was actually another lady too that had gotten away from him, and I listened to her interview as well. And they were still in his vehicle. She was completely naked. I guess some things went down in his vehicle, and I'm not sure what had happened. but she was able to end up locking him out of the vehicle, and he busts the window out.
He was getting gas, I think.
Is that what it was? I don't
Yeah.
remember what it was. I just know that she was naked in the vehicle, and she locked him out because she saw his gun. She knew that, she was in for it. She knew that he was trouble. Like he was gonna, really hurt her. And so he ends up busting a window out. While he's in the midst of doing this, she's able to escape out of the other side. And she said she just ran as fast as she could. And it's funny because both Cindy and this other woman, they both said that they heard voices in their head saying, "Run, run for your life, run, run, run." And it's believed to be other victims of his telling them to run. I don't know who believes in what, but they both believe that it was victims
Wow.
of his yelling at them, telling them, "Run, run for your life." But this other lady, she ended up running to a house, and I think she said that they were like super religious people. Who were those people that walk from house to house?
Oh, the Jehovah's Witness.
Jehovah Witness, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So they were part of the Jehovah Witness, and she said that they were having like a little meeting there or something that night. So there's like just a whole bunch of them at this older couple's house, and this lady, she's super funny in the interview, recounting all the details, and she says, "And I'm just butt ass naked running through their door." But
Right in the middle of their prayer meeting.
right in the middle of their prayer meeting. But she said that one of the older ladies, she went and got her a robe. She put her robe on. They called the police, and Hanson said the same thing about her as well. And this happened before Cindy, but he said the same thing. Like, yeah, she wanted more money. I wasn't going to give her more money. She got mad, and she's just doing this out of spite.
Here's a donut.
Yeah,
Right, here's a dozen.
he just gives. Yep, here's you a dozen. But she says that he stalked her for years after that. And I've seen others too saying that like he would stake out these victims, or like I guess acquaintances of these victims would say, "Yeah, we saw him around a lot before that, but then after, he wasn't around anymore after they went missing." So I do think that he stalked his victims, and he kind of figured out, their daily routines, and that's kind of when he decides to, make a move or, say, "Hey, will you go to dinner with me?" And then it ends up not turning out to be dinner.
Now, was he still married when all this was going on?
Yeah.
Wow.
He's still married. Yeah. And he was married all the way up until he was convicted of these crimes. She didn't divorce him until he went to prison.
Well, we were talking about that earlier. So at this point, wonder if the wife was just afraid, or
I can see that.
maybe he, like I said, he was so good at feeding her, whatever she needed to hear to, justify it.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Or was she
to
just
keep-
terrified?
Well, and just to keep her as a built-in alibi, as a built-in
Yeah.
somebody on his side. I watched an interview that the police did with him, and he was delighted at the fear that he caused these women. Like
Oh,
he
yeah.
said, I would put a gun in their mouth in the vehicle with me, and I would watch their faces. I would listen to their cries and begging me not to harm them. And that was what was his whole goal, was to just absolutely scare them to death. And that's what he liked to do.
Yeah.
And so if his wife had an inkling that something was, not quite right.
Right.
She was probably scared to death of him as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrified.
absolutely.
Yeah. Because, I mean, how many times was the gun in her mouth?
Right.
You know,
Well, and
just
then
so he could get off on that.
and it's so strange too because all of these victims he took back to his home before he eventually took them to his airplane, took them to the woods.
And
And
hunted
it's like,
them like crazy.
Yeah.
how did the wife not know that these women were down in her basement? Unless like that was his man cave and she wasn't allowed down there or something.
Well, it's just like BTK when he had all the memorabilia and stuff that he had saved over the years, and the wife had no idea that he'd even had it. You know,
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
these guys are so cunning and so. I mean, I hate to call them smart, but they really are.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, a lot
I
of them
mean,
are
he taught
so
himself how to fly a plane, for Pete's sake.
and didn't
Right.
die. I mean, so kudos
Right.
to you, bro. I mean,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
you
I
probably
just
was
can't
a
get
pretty
over
cool
that
guy, other than this, raping and killing
killing
thing.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you make
Yeah.
donuts. I mean, dude, come on.
It's crazy.
He was also
Um,
one though that liked to keep little mementos.
yeah. So he liked to keep their jewelry or pens or, little things, little trinkets of these women.
Mhm.
Because there would be like a victim identified because, a lot of women around this area were going missing and they would end up finding these bodies in the woods near the Connect River. And, they would be found, but they would have, a necklace missing or a ring missing or certain pins from their shirts were missing. So yeah, yeah. So whenever they finally got the search warrant, they were specifically searching for those missing pieces from those women. I'm trying to think. I was going to say something. So yeah, so after, so they went back to the hotel to try to find Cindy to have her do this polygraph, which is just insane to me. They couldn't find her. So they asked Hanson, is there any way that we can search your home? And he was like, yeah, sure, no problem. He was on great terms with the men from the police department. He's like, come on in. I might even have some extra donuts in here for you. Yeah.
Right. God, I love a
A
good
little extra
pastry.
sprinkle on
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're searching his home. They go down in the basement and they see, all of the things that Cindy had described to them. And he also had kind of like a hidden riflery closet. They said that it was hidden by like a piece of paneling. But in there, he had lots and lots of different guns and bows and arrows and rifles and things. But the specific rifle that Cindy had said that she'd seen or that he had used, to scare her with was not there. So they're like, I don't know, that's strange, but whatever. So they search and then they go to the attic and there is a ladder from the attic. And one of the detectives, he's like, hey, you think we should go up here? And the other guy's like, no, it's fine. He's been cooperative enough. I think we've seen enough here. So they leave. Well, there's a detective that is investigating all of these bodies that have been found. And the interviews that I was listening to, there was a woman that was working in this police department at the time. And she had started off as just like a secretary. Well, then I think it was like 1973, a law had passed saying that women had to be given the same rights as men as far as, like the workplace. And so I think because of, demographics, they were kind of forced to hire a couple of women onto the police department as police officers. And so she and one other woman there, they kind of weaseled their way in and they become police officers. And it was kind of like the men would give them like the dirty work, that they
Right.
didn't
Yeah.
want to do. Um, But this woman, she says, I think this is a serial killer. I think we have a serial killer on our hands. And they all kind of just wrote her off. And I think more than anything, she said specifically, she said, I bet it's this Robert Hansen man. And they're like, no, it's not. They kind of shrugged her off. But I think it was more just because they didn't want her to be right, because she's a
Right.
woman,
Right.
But eventually there's another detective who is a man. He's kind of on board. He's like, you know what? I think you're right. I think you're onto something. And so he reaches out to, I think it's like an FBI agent, and they profile who they think that their suspect might be. And they say, well, he's probably a loner. He probably has a stutter. And they give all these characteristics that are just pointing even more towards Hansen.
Right.
And so at this point, that with Cindy's testimony, they were able to get a warrant to search his vehicles, his plane, the bakery, and his home. So this was months later. I think this was in October. So she got away from him in, was it May? I think it was May. Or no, it was June. And then, 4 months later, they finally get this search warrant, which I'm sure he had, killed lots more women in between that time.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So they finally get the search warrant, and they go to his bakery because he's at work at the time. They take him into the police department. They go to his home where his wife, I think his mom, and their two children are there at the house. And the woman detective, she said that the only thing that she can remember, like the main thing that she can remember, are the faces of the children. They were distraught. They were scared. They didn't understand what was going on, and she said that the wife was completely like astounded, like, what is going on? Like, I don't understand what's going on. As well as her mother-in-law, which was, Hansen's mom. They're all, kind of like, what's going on? But, the wife, she was very compliant. She's like, let me just take the kids out of here. And, they all leave while they search the house. So they're searching around, and they're not really finding anything. They've been searching for hours. Finally, somebody finds a map behind his headboard in his bedroom. And there's a map that has 22 X's on it. And I think like 4 or 5 of those X's are bodies that have been found in that area, in the wilderness along the Knik River. And so they were like, "Well, this is really something,"
And that was up where his cabin was at.
Yes, his little hunting shack. And then eventually they make it up into the attic, and in the very far corner of the attic, they said that it was under some insulation even. They find a bag, like a plastic baggie full of jewelry and his memorabilia from his victims, along with the gun that Cindy said that he was pointing at her, the gun that he was threatening her with, that they didn't find the first time that they searched the house. And it's just crazy to think that if they had gone up in the attic the first time that they had searched, it would have saved a lot of people.
Yeah, it probably would have been over.
Yeah.
Right.
Months ago.
But that was the second or third time of being so close.
Right.
It's got to be the donuts.
The pastries.
I mean, you do anything for a glazed donut.
Yeah. It was those pastries.
I'm telling you.
I had also read that a lot of his victims were, so there was a topless club. These were strippers, And a lot of these women, along with the woman that had gotten away from him, not Cindy, but the other lady, I'm not sure what her name was, but they were all, I guess, recruited by a company. This company wanted them to go to Alaska. They made it sound like it was all sunshine and rainbows. They would pay for their airfare to get them to Alaska. And then they would also pay for their room and board. And all they had to do was work there at the strip club.
So they were kind of like indentured slaves, really.
Yep.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, you do this and we'll pay for this.
Yeah. And they thought like, oh, this is a great deal, especially for women that like didn't have a good home life, or they're trying to get away from their current situation. But once they get there, they realize, that they're going to have to pay all of that back. That's what they're working for. They're working to pay back for their airfare. They're working to pay back for their room and board, So a lot of these women are working for nothing practically, and they don't get paid anything from the club other than tips. So when you really think about it, like they're not making anything at all.
No.
And it takes a long time for them to be able to get out of that situation after that. So that's where a lot of the women come from. And also a lot of those women, if they go missing, they're not reported missing by anybody because they're already missing from their family, or they don't have a family, to worry about them.
And society looks at them like, why are we wasting our time?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I know that there's a couple that, weren't prostitutes or sex workers or, strippers or whatever, but a lot of them were. And there was actually two friends who worked in this topless club. Robert Hansen goes into this club. He's talking to the one friend. He goes in and sees her several nights, and then eventually he's talking to her, and he's like, "Hey, would you want to go on a date with me?" And she's like, "No, I think I'll pass." Like, he just kind of gives her the creeps. She's not about it. Well, then a couple nights later, he asks the friend, "Hey, do you want to go on a date with me?" And the friend never returns after the date. Wow. So she knew that it was him. And I want to say that she reported it too. And it was kind of just swept under the rug, just like all of the other women were. Yeah. So eventually, they, with the search warrant, they were able to get all of the jewelry. They were able to get the gun. And with the gun, they were able to get ballistics from the shell casings found at several different crime scenes. And they were able to link him to, I want to say it was 4. And he kind of said, like, well, because it took him months. At first, he was completely denying it. No, all of these women, they all deserved what they got. But eventually he kind of realized, like, they have ballistics now. There's no getting out of this. And so he told his lawyer, he's like, I want to meet with the DA. I want to get this over with. And he didn't want to go to trial. And I think it was mainly because of his stutter. He didn't want to be in the press. It would embarrass him more having to get up on the stand and talk with his stutter. He didn't want any part of that.
But didn't the 17-year-old, didn't she move to Oregon? And they actually brought her back, and this time she did take the polygraph test, and that's when she started describing it again.
Yeah.
And they went and actually seen where there were chain marks on the post.
Yes.
And things like that. And then it was like, you know what, your donuts are good, buddy, but this is not
adding up. Yep, they ain't that good. Yes, they ended up looking into it a little bit more. Yeah, the Detective Flothi, he ended up finding her. He brought her back. He got her out of her situation. Um, and she lived with a family that actually attended the same church as the Hansons, which was kind of crazy to me.
Wow.
Which it was probably a small town, but she did. She stayed with that family, and she helped cook and clean as her payment of living there, and
Better than the alternative.
right, much better
Yeah.
alternative.
No kidding. Yeah.
Hmm. While going through trial and all of that, they really helped take care of her, which also, like, I think that her testimony probably made a big difference
Oh yeah.
in the trial. But he was
Just
charged.
the idea for me that this man takes you to an unknown place,
Mhm.
basically drops you out in the wilderness, in the cold or whatever, and hunts you like an animal, like large game. And you don't know if you're supposed to zig, zag, run straight. There's nobody around you for miles. And
Yes,
knowing that that's the last few minutes of your life is you
running for your life.
running,
Yeah,
like being ran down by like a dog.
yeah. And he says in
And
all of his
he loved it.
interviews, he
He
says in all
loved
of
it.
his interviews, these women deserved it.
Hmm.
They were retaliating against me.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
if you really think about it, no.
Right.
What it was is he wasn't getting any adrenaline from killing animals anymore.
Right.
He wanted
Yeah.
to hunt women. So
Right.
that's what he would do.
The crazy thing is too, is, he had a really tight relationship, loving relationship with his mom. He did have a little bit of angst, I feel like, around about his dad,
Yeah.
but his mom like was good people to him, and he was never mistreated that way.
Yeah.
Um, but he was just angry and mad at the world because he stammered around and had some acne scars,
Yeah. Yeah.
but he got enjoyment out of running them
Animals.
like dogs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think to him, the only thing that he ever really enjoyed was hunting and fishing and,
Hmm.
wildlife game. Um, and since he had kind of plateaued on that, he's like, well, what more can I do? I'm
What's
not getting
next?
any adrenaline from anything
Right.
else.
Right.
He's like, well, why not women? And I would
Right.
say a lot of the girls, in high school and stuff, like they wouldn't pay him
Mind.
any mind.
Yeah.
They wouldn't give him the time of day. So now he's forcing these women to give him the time of day.
Hmm.
Makes
And he
sense.
says, well,
Yeah.
I wouldn't shoot these women or kill these women unless they were running away from me. If they would have just stayed, they wouldn't have died.
Right.
But like in their mind, they're already going to die.
They're dead.
So
Yeah.
they're gonna run for their life. They're gonna fight for their life. Why
Right.
would they
Mm.
stay?
Right.
So I think he would have killed them either way. But he knew that
Oh,
they were gonna run. He knew that they were gonna run, and that's what he wanted.
it's
He
human
wanted to hunt
nature.
them
Yeah.
down.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
That's
he
right.
he also kind of gave them the opportunity to run just
Yeah.
for the thrill of it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yep.
and
For sure.
at that point, it's the the wild animal getting that trigger instinct to chase
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that makes it super duper scary. Just
Hmm.
knowing that those are your last minutes on Earth
yeah,
are filled with terror and someone is hunting you. I just,
Yeah.
and to hear the joy that he gets by stuttering around and talking about it
Right.
was just, I couldn't believe it. And
So, what
So he
eventually
ended
happened to
up.
this guy?
What is it?
What eventually happened to this guy?
So he ended up only being charged for 4 murders because that was a
mhm,
part of his plea deal. if he would only be charged for 4 murders, he would give all the details for all of the others. And like I said, it was mainly because he didn't want to go to trial. He wanted to get this over with.
Right.
So he was charged for 4 murders, as well as the abduction and rape of Cindy Paulson. He was charged with assault, kidnapping, theft, and insurance fraud. That's when he was charged with the insurance fraud. And then he also wanted to, I guess he was able to like pick his federal prison. He wanted to make sure that he was going to a certain federal
Part of the
federal
plea deal.
prison.
Yeah.
Yep, as part of the plea deal. He didn't want any publicity in the press. And he also wanted to help decipher the markings on the map. So he wanted to go with them into the woods and show them exactly where all of these bodies were buried.
Again, a typical serial killer type
Yes.
game.
And he got a
Control
thrill from that. That was
narcissism.
probably his last thrill that he ever got. He wanted to make sure that he went out with them. And even though there were 22 X's on the map, he only admitted to 17 of those. So he admitted that 17 of those were crimes that he had actually committed. But I think at all 22, there were bodies found. But yeah,
So-
he ended up getting 461 years in prison, no possibility of parole, and he died at 75 years old in 2014 of natural causes.
Wow.
Yep, all that time, and he
Ended up
Like,
dying an old man.
he just died an old man.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, guys, that's a good one, and I know that's one of your favorites, Britt.
Oh, it is, and I
So-
could go on and on.
You know, it's hard to squeeze it all in an hour.
It really is.
So, guys-
I'm at Myrtle Beach right now, and you know
Yeah.
we had an 8-hour drive down here, and
plenty
I
of time to do some research.
listened to a podcast. Well, I drove the whole time, but I listened to a podcast the whole way down here. It was mostly, interviews of his victims, interviews of the detectives, the woman detective I was telling you about.
Yeah.
Cindy Paulson was on there. And I just find victims' interviews really interesting, and like
Sure.
just their recount.
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, all right, we got to wrap that up. Guys, be sure to check us out on the Nighthawk Facebook page, one word, Nighthawk Facebook page, or Nighthawk Radio, one word. Check us out on Seth's Daily Podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and Seth the Soul Guy on TikTok. Keep an eye out for next week for another Two Girls One Cut. Guys, thanks a bunch, man. It was a lot of fun.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Seth, take us home, buddy.